Right, everybody. Hello and welcome to Forza Italian Football TV. It's me, your host Dov. I'm back, and I've got a lovely background there in commemoration of the season's game. Although it might be backwards to people, I don't know. It looks backwards to me. And this is what just happened. So, what just happened? And to help me discuss what just happened in Serie A, the Juventus Inter game, I've got Nicholas Carroll, who has shown his complete and utter unbiasedness, obviously, with his shirt. Nicholas, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks.
You're very well, really.
Yeah, well, I'll try and keep emotions separate.
Excellent. Cool. And obviously helping Nick to keep his emotions in check and helping us is Vieri Capretta. Vieri, how are you doing?
I'm very well. I'm completely unbiased. Actually, I have Quadrado in my fantasy football team.
Oh, well, that helps.
So it's been a good evening.
Perfect. Right. So obviously everybody, I assume, who's watching this watched the game, Juventus versus Inter. Juventus won the game 1-0 thanks to that magnificent, was a wonderful Quadrado strike just before the break. And it was really one of the games of the season, I thought, and I think most people kind of come away from that thinking the same thing, particularly in the first half. But I want to kind of start with what Allegri said and look at the game as a whole first and kind of going into it. And he said that the game was more or less of a Champions League kind of level match, a semi-final or a quarter-final level match between the two sides. So, Vieri, would you agree with that statement that you've got kind of two teams there who are operating at the level of Champions League sides?
Well, we've seen some teams in the Champions League quarterfinals and semi-finals in the past 2-3 seasons that probably aren't even at the level Inter are now. And that shows the good work of the management that has brought in Pioli, and obviously the club itself and the investors trying to reach the level Juve are at. Juve are obviously a Champions League level. It was more about finding an opponent, and Inter are definitely on the right path.
What about you, Nick? Do you think Inter are on the right path? A Champions League team that couldn't make it out of the Europa League group stage?
You had to bring that up, didn't you?
Of course.
Yeah, I think it's definitely. I think I can't remember who I saw. There was some commentary that they were saying Inter is the kind of team of the future in terms of the Serie A, where Juve are the present. But to the game, I guess, yeah, intensity-wise, and particularly that first half, I think that I can't remember seeing a half of that greater quality in Serie A for a long time. And I think it's almost sad in a way that we haven't seen a lot of those kind of games in recent seasons. And I think it's something the league desperately needs, not only for the league as a whole, but for teams like Juve. They really need to be challenged more often to be able to then go to Europe and actually match it with those European clubs. So I'm not sure. I wouldn't say Inter's there just yet. But in terms of the match and the competition, the competitiveness of it, yeah, 100%. I think it was incredible game, result aside, obviously, for myself.
I think what's the negative side, if you want to find a negative side about it all, is how easily Juventus seem to win these games, despite having an opponent which I think played at their best, almost Inter, especially in the first half, as you said, Nick. But Juve still found that great goal. They had more than just that. They had a lot of chances to actually show that they could have scored more, and they won it.
Yeah.
No, sorry, Nick, fire away.
Oh no, I was just going to basically agree with what he was saying. I think Inter were a bit wasteful, but in saying that, Juve were kind of there, particularly in the second half. It was almost like they were sitting back. They looked a bit nervous, a bit shaky. It was almost like they were waiting for Inter to kind of do something, but nothing really happened. So I was a bit disappointed with that area, that we didn't really go for the kill and try and get that result. We were a bit wasteful, but exactly what Vieri said.
Right, we'll get fired on into the actual game in a minute. Obviously, I want to talk about going into the game, because going into this, a lot of people were kind of talking about this could be a kind of upset with Juventus getting beat, because Inter were coming into the match at the Juventus Stadium on a 7-game winning run in Serie A, which is kind of something that's unheard of in terms of Inter in recent years, a winning run that long. Nick, I'm going to come back to you. What's been the cause of this change in Inter? Because if we had this conversation about 4 or 5 months ago, with Frank de Boer in charge. And all three of us were actually at the first derby at the San Siro this season, which is probably Frank de Boer's best game as Inter coach. What did Pioli change to get such consistent performances and such consistent results?
That's the thing. It's Pioli is getting a lot of praise, and rightfully so. But I mean, you look at the way the team's playing in terms of the formation, the strategy, and the players itself. There's not a lot of changes to what's happening. It's very much the same kind of strategy going into it. What seems to be the difference is the players' mentality and the confidence. They're going into games with a different mentality, and I think it was Idera that said a couple of weeks ago that for the first time there's actually unity amongst the team. So I think it's not necessarily the strategy or anything like that Pioli's bought. It's actually the team camaraderie or the motivation or something. He's doing something in the kind of the mental realms, I guess you could say, that is bringing that team together and is actually bringing some results. And I'm not one to dismiss De Boer, because I think, obviously when it all happened with De Boer, I was a big one that said he needed more time, and I still agree with that. But I think a lot of the reason behind Pioli's results is also the build-up work that De Boer did bring. I think Pioli's kind of Serie A experience and just his general kind of motivation has probably just helped it come along maybe a bit quicker than it might have with De Boer.
Well, there we go. So that's that. Vieri, Pioli surprised a lot of people when the lineups were announced and went with a 3-man defence. Why do you think he did that? Do you think that was just to surprise Allegri, or do you think that is something that he's maybe looking to implement at Inter?
I think it was specific to this game, to be honest. It wasn't any sort of surprise, because we've been talking about it in the news. We've been reading about it for the last couple of days. I think he's just trying to predict Juventus lineup. When you've got Mandzukic, who's a centre forward, playing as a winger, and Pjanic, who could play as a number 10, playing in midfield. That tells you how offensive Juve have been in the past weeks, and we're playing tonight with a very attacking 4-2-3-1 formation. So I think he was trying to kind of contain that, whilst at the same time playing all his offensive players, the ones he's counted on in the past weeks, which are always Perisic, Candreva, João Mario, and then obviously Icardi up front. So having them on the pitch, but having that extra defender in Medel, who does a bit of everything. He was the first one playing the ball when Inter were in possession, and he was the first one trying to kind of close all the gaps the defenders would leave. So I think it was specific to this game, because Juve up front obviously have quality that no one else has. You've got Dybala. You've seen Dybala the first 20 minutes. He had 2 amazing chances, and he basically created them on his own.
It took him just 2 minutes to get the first one in, and that was an overhead kick. So that kind of showed you where he was going for this game. Right. So getting onto the game then, Vieri, I'm going to stick with you for a sec. What did you kind of think of the first half, particularly the first half, because it was end to end chances for both teams. It was a joy to behold.
It was so much fun. I think it would have been a fantastic game had Inter scored the first goal. Had Inter scored one of the chances they had. I'm thinking the first one that comes to mind is that Mario Icardi chance with the Perisic cross, and he just about touched it and it went wide. I think if Inter scored first, being Juventus the better side overall, it would have been a really fun game. With Juve scoring, particularly just before halftime whistle, that put Juve in the best possible position for the second half, where Inter basically didn't even get out of the changing room. They hardly played in the second half. So I think it was definitely a fantastic kind of show for Serie A, for people, bringing people closer, telling people Serie A can have spectacular games. It lacked a bit of goals, but it was definitely a great first half. And I think it shows that Juve can still easily win these games, but in the future, teams like Inter could really, come this time next year, Inter could win the same game if they're a bit more used to the right mentality, the right winning mentality. So maybe it's a turning point in a way.
Right. Well, I've got a couple of comments from the live chat on YouTube. So if you do want to leave a comment on the live chat, just write it there, and we'll get to it if we can. We've got two that kind of go on the same, kind of down the same path. We've got one from Mohit Dolas who says Juve won't survive in the Champions League with this type of first half, and they're really susceptible to high pressing. And then Mark Neal comes in and says that Juventus will get torn apart in the Champions League. Nick, do you think that's true, that if Juventus going to play the same way they did tonight, then the Champions League is just a no-go for them against the top sides in Europe?
Yeah, well, that's been a lot of the kind of talk around that, the new formation with the 4-2-3-1, whether that is something that Allegri is looking to use in Europe or whether that's purely a Serie A thing. Because as you mentioned, Inter at the start, they came out and they were pressing very, very high and very quick, and it seemed to put Juve off a bit. Almost similar to what they did in the first derby that we were at, but they were really pressing, and it seems to put them off. It's happened a couple matches this season when Juve are put under pressure, they can kind of look a bit shaky. Obviously more often than not they come over it and they'll get the result. But Europe, as the commenter has mentioned, it's a completely different game, and that is a worry with that the 4-2-3-1. It's all good for the attack, obviously, but I think one thing is, and I mentioned it in the preview, is that that reliance or the pressure that it puts on those defensive midfielders in Khedira and Pjanic, where actually today they actually came out with, I think it was 4 tackles apiece, so they actually contributed quite well in that area, but they're not really what you'd regard as kind of out-and-out tacklers, or it's not exactly where you'd place them in their optimal position. So that is the concern with that formation. So it is something that Allegri's, I guess, need to look at before going to Europe. It's hard to say what he has in plan, but yeah, I do agree somewhat. It is definitely somewhat of a worry.
Yeah, you got anything to add to that?
I think, bear in mind tonight, Claudio Marchisio was on the bench, and he's a player I just don't see Allegri leaving out for an important Champions League clash. So he's got to find a place for him on the pitch. I think against Porto, he might be playing this 4-2-3-1 formation, but if they are to go through to the next round against a team that's theoretically better than Porto, I think he'll have 3 in the middle with Marchisio as a defensive midfielder.
Just on Marchisio, you said you think you can't see him being left out of Europe, but do you not think Allegri played his best 11 today, or like why was
I mean, the thing about Juventus this season is that they don't really have a best 11.
That's true.
Because they have a lot of different options in terms of what type of players they've got, that it's very easy for them to adapt to their opponent. Like someone like Cuadrado, obviously he had a fantastic night tonight and he plays in different positions. He can play as a fullback as much as a striker. But, you can leave him out and then add an extra midfielder in, or leave out Mandzukic, who's essentially a striker and he's just relegated on the side. So I think for this game, obviously it turned out it was probably their best 11, because I think Juventus played very well tonight, considering the level Inter are at.
Yeah.
But I think they'll adapt hugely to their opponent.
Yeah.
Do you think it'll matter who their opponents are when they've got a player like Paulo Dybala, who I thought tonight probably you could argue was the leader. He's the guy, I think, who makes that Juventus attack tick. Vieri, I know you're a big fan of his. I mean,
yeah.
How good is this guy going to be? I mean, he's been linked with Real Madrid, even though he signed a new contract. I mean, is this basically the guy who's going to lead the Juventus team for the next 10 years?
He's fantastic. I think to really evaluate a player, you have to see them live, and I've seen him at the stadium a couple times, and he's really good. He's just that top level, and you saw that with that overhead kick in the first minute. Just how easily, I think the details make a difference with someone like Dybala. Just the way he controls the ball, 9 times out of 10, it's just stuck to his foot. He's not a big guy, but physically he resists tackles very well. He's a strong player, a bit like Messi in a way. He remembers that, he reminds you of that kind of small but very physically strong player, and very technical as well. I think he's the one, if you are to do anything in Europe, he's the one who makes a difference. more than Higuain, who's just, you know, a lethal finisher. Obviously, very good in link-up play, but essentially a finisher. Dybala has been scoring a lot less this season compared to the past couple of seasons, but he's the kind of, like, I think Allegri sees him as that advanced regista, kind of number 10 and striker that links up play extremely well. He's definitely going to play no matter who the other 11 are, the other 10 are on the pitch.
There we go. Nick, I'll bring it back to Inter before we kind of move on. I mean, can you take any positives from that, or kind of the result from an Inter point of view?
I think there's a lot of positives to take. You know, the result's disappointing, but other than that, there's so many things to be. You know, obviously that first half, we pretty much did everything except score a goal. I thought, you know, the defense, that three-man defense, I wasn't sure how that would work. I thought it actually came together quite nicely. I thought Medel and Miranda were excellent on most occasions. So, I mean, Perisic is one of my favourites. I mean,
does it not worry you though? Because I thought that Perisic, Eder is just how he can command a starting 11, or a place in any football team, just baffles me. I don't understand it. And Icardi is one of the best strikers in the league, but for me, they're just far too wasteful and indecisive. Like, there's a number of counterattacks, but in the second half, there was a few, and in the first half where you had Icardi making wrong decisions, you had Eder, I don't know what he was trying to read a book before he makes his decision, try to take on the whole team. Perisic was the same, always looking to do the same thing over and over again. And for me, I'm looking at that thinking, right, these guys have limitations. Yeah. And that's going to really stop Inter going forward, in my opinion.
They have limitations at the moment because, I mean, they're nowhere near a finished product. But I guess I'm kind of looking more at the project and where they can reach. And I think they do have the ability to go quite far. So, you know, you saw quite often with João Mario, you know, it seems like he's kind of looks a lot better in that forward space, but he's still not quite sure which way to go or which decision to make, which pass to make on certain occasions. So they're still trying to get that balance going forward. I mean, other than the last, 7-8 weeks, the attack hasn't looked that fluid before, but it's starting to come together, but it's just more those last passes that need to be made more effectively. But, I can see what's going on. And particularly when you've got the likes of Roberto Gagliardini now, who's, impressive. He's amazing. Like I'm surprised by how incredible he's been in Inter. Not only him, and then you look at Kondogbia and the effect, how much he's improved in the last couple of weeks has been incredible. I mean, Inter had, as you mentioned, Inter had quite a bad second half. I mean, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't the best. But at least when Brozovic came off, Kondogbia came on, he gave a bit more energy to that midfield, and it brought them back into the match where it looked like they might be able to push for another goal. So, there is a lot of positives happening in that Inter team. It's just, I think fans and, media need to, it's very easy 7 in a row to get all excited over, but the team's nowhere near a finished product. And that's the thing. I think everyone needs to keep their feet on the ground.
Well, keep your feet on the ground, Nick. Vieri, where did Inter go from here then? Because everybody was excited with this amazing winning run. They're now a point behind Lazio in the Serie A table, sitting in 5th place, and obviously brought down to earth by their biggest rivals in Italy. So where are they going to go from here?
I think they'll try and pick up what they had before playing against Juve. Losing at the Juventus.
That's the easy answer, Vieri. Come on.
But it's absolutely fine to lose this game. Their aim is the 3rd spot, and everyone's going to drop. Well, everyone this season dropped points at the Juventus Stadium, apart from Juve, obviously. So I know I'm saying a lot of obvious things, but no. On a serious note, I think they've got everything to definitely come 4th. So at the end of the run, beat Lazio, and if Roma or Napoli are to lose a bit of consistency, then possibly that 3rd spot that would essentially make a huge difference to the whole.
Do you think they can get the 3rd spot though? Obviously, we've seen Napoli put 7 past Bologna. Was it yesterday? Lazio, they decided to score 6 against Pescara. Roma have obviously got Fiorentina on Tuesday. I mean, do you think Inter can get into the Champions League when you've got teams like Napoli, Roma, and Lazio who are on fire at the minute as well?
I think they can. I personally think they can because they look very consistent, and I think that's the quality that's been missing. And if Roma and Napoli were consistent, they could probably really challenge Juventus for the title. Instead, they're kind of lingering there. They're never good enough. And if you start the season and your aim is to win the title, and already halfway through the season you're kind of not sure you'll make it, then that could hinder the whole of the campaign and make it even worse. So Inter just have to keep on thinking about themselves. I think the minimum objective is the 4th spot, considering how badly the season started. But they could, maths says mathematically they could get the 3rd spot. And Roma and Napoli obviously are on fire, but they've not seemed as good as they should be. So there is a bit of space. I think Inter will eventually overcome Lazio. I'm sure about that.
So then it's just a fight between Roma, Napoli, and Inter then to see who doesn't mess up enough to get that third spot. Sorry, Nick, do you agree with that, or are you a bit more pessimistic?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Realistically, I'm looking at 4th spot is where we should be targeting. As Vieri said, Inter needs to just look at what we're doing. In terms of a Champions League spot, I think I think it's Roma or Napoli's to lose. I don't think it's really Inter's to win. In saying that, even if Inter continues in the 7-game streaks that we had in that kind of form, if Roma and Napoli are producing half decent performances, they really shouldn't be losing those spots. I think they're just much better teams at the moment. So, it can happen. Obviously. I would love it to happen, but I think if it does, it's more going to be Roma or Napoli kind of just losing the plot rather than Inter being amazing.
And obviously, kind of Juve are 6 points clear at the top, and with a game in hand on Napoli, they're 7 clear of Roma on the same games. I think we talked about this very briefly when we did our What Just Happened after Juventus were beaten by Fiorentina, but anything changed, Nick, in terms of Juventus winning the Scudetto, or is that just just hurry up and give them the little shield so we can move on?
Yeah, it's just a formality. I mean, no one's even interested in that. Everyone just cares about Europe now. No one's looking at number 1.
There you go. I don't think Vieri is going to have anything different to say, are you?
Unless they really go forward in the Champions League and they face really big teams and that, and if they drop points before and after Champions League games. I think that's the only variable. Otherwise, it's tough to see. When they win games like tonight, when they could have conceded goals, could have lost, could have at least tied, they won it with a clean sheet. What can you say?
Yeah, exactly. What can you say? Well, that was their 28th win in a row at the Juventus Stadium. Obviously, that's a record that's an all-time record that's ongoing. So they'll probably be added to that in the coming weeks as well. Right, guys. Unless you've got anything else to say, I think that's pretty much it. We should wrap up. I'm going to take that silence as that you're all good. So obviously you can follow us on Twitter or follow Forza Italian Football on Twitter at Serie FFC. Go on the website. There's some features and stuff on there. And there's a number of YouTube videos which will be on the YouTube channel as well. Lovely Nick has been working hard and Vieri's back from his break, so you'll be seeing more of his beautiful face as well. You can follow both the guys on Twitter. Nick, where can everybody find you? Because I can't remember your Twitter handle off the top of my head.
At Nick Z Carroll.
There you go. And Vieri, how can everybody find you on the Twitter?
Mine is simple, just Vieri Capretta.
There you go. You can't find me on Twitter because I don't use it anymore. But you can find me on Facebook. It's Dovskivoni on Facebook. Just type it in and you'll see it there. I think that's pretty much it. Also, as well, one last thing. Obviously, you've seen it. We've been doing a lot more things on YouTube and trying to do more things on the website. If you do want to help us, which would be lovely and we would appreciate it, I have got a Patreon account where you can donate as little as $1 per month, and obviously that would be very much appreciated if you click on the link in the description of this video and any other of the videos on the YouTube channel. That would be very much appreciated. So I think, well, there'll be a podcast on Forza Italian Football probably tomorrow, so a live podcast, so check out the guys for that. And we'll see you after the next big Serie A game. So until then, arrivederci.